The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice. Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for April 18th through the 22nd of 2022. Alright, let's start out with the Euro-Yen pair. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since there is strong monthly long strength from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here, through a breakout, an immediate break back in, showing normal short strength. However, price coming right back up to stop out that pivot high where that normal short strength was created, and thus creating strong long strength. And so in the long term, I'm long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, since there was a strong long trade that formed right here and a weak short trade that formed right here, in the short term, I'm also long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. Okay, so initially, back in 2020 at this point right here, there was a strong long trade that formed. And then in May of 2021 at this point right here, there was compact short price action that formed, which shows strong short strength. And so at this point, the bias was short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And so as price headed toward that main target, it ran into a strong monthly gap level that runs right through these levels here. And it tried to get through it, but it couldn't and pulled all the way back to these levels. However, the weekly bias was still short. Thus, there was an opportunity for a great short entry for the stop losses at this pivot high right here. And then price went for a second attempt to get past that gap level, failed again and pulled all the way back up to these levels. And again, since the weekly bias was still short, that was another great short trade opportunity, again with the stop loss at this pivot high right here. And then on this attempt, price actually got through that monthly gap level. However, simultaneously, there's a new weekly strong long trade that formed right here, which was actually stronger than this compact short price action that formed right here. And so at this point, the bias became long. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit right here. Now, moreover, 2 weeks ago, there was actually a weak short trade that formed right here. And so again, the bias remains long. Or in other words, price is now likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And so if you recall, on last week's weekly forecast, I was considering a 4-hour mid-row long entry roughly in these areas. So let me go ahead and show you what happened with that. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, last week I was mentioning this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, and how there was a breakout, an immediate break back in, signaling normal short strength. However, the break back in candle was minimal, and so ideally I wanted to see how price moves after this break back in to confirm whether or not this breakout and break back in was legitimate. However, the following Monday, price opened with a gap at these levels right here. And so I couldn't confirm whether or not this break back in was legitimate. However, considering, like I showed you on the overview, there is monthly strong strength that just formed in these areas right here. Now, taking that into consideration, since price did come right back up to that pivot high where that normal short strength was created, thus creating strong long strength for that mid-row long entry, I took a long entry roughly at these 135.30 levels right here on a slight pullback with the stop loss at this pivot low right here. Now initially that weekly bias's main target was at this level right here. However, again, since I was not sure of this breakback in's legitimacy, I took out the entire position roughly at these 136.70 levels right here. And then moreover, as price pulled back twice to that mid-row long entries price level right here, I did not take any further long entries, for again, I'm still not sure if this breakback in was legitimate. And so at this point, even if price does pull all the way back to this entry level, I will not be taking any further long entries based on this mid-row long entry. So what I'll be looking for in terms of mid-row long entries right up to that weekly bias's main target right here is as follows. So let me just get rid of these and zoom out. Now first of all, on this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, now although this is a legitimate trend line for lower time frame confirmation, even if there was a breakout, an immediate breakback in, and price still reaching that pivot high, creating strong long strength, I will likely not take this mid-row long entry, for the main target is way too close at these levels right here. So in terms of another long entry, I'm going to need price to pull all the way back down, creating space between that main target, and then perhaps having another trendline breakout confirmation of strong long strength. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated on whether or not I get that mid-row long entry to take it up to that weekly bias's main target up here. Okay, let's go on to the NZD/USD pair. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and trendline breakout confirmations, please watch my price action trading course, for that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you could understand how to trade price action. Okay, this is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this move up right here, starting from this range right here, was solely based on momentum, in the long term I'm short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. However, on the daily chart, since it seems there was a strong long trade and a weak short trade that formed right here, in the short term for the time being, I am long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So in October of 2021, there was a strong short trade that formed right here, and then a weak long trade formed right here. So at this point, the bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high, and that main target was hit right here. And so currently I'm waiting for another weekly long trade to form so I can measure the strength differential between this hypothetical long trade and the last weekly short trade right here, so I could come up with a weekly bias whether long or short. Now that said, I was mentioning there was a daily bias that formed with a long trade that formed here and a short trade that formed right here. And so as you guys know, I took a short entry roughly at the 69.08 levels right here. However, on the communities tab, I posted I aborted that entire short entry at the 68.77 levels right here. And moreover, I actually took a long entry roughly at the 68.04 levels right here. So let me go ahead and explain to you what's happening on this daily bias. So let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, the last long trade that formed was right here, while the last short trade that formed was right here. Now strictly going from this daily strength, this long trade was stronger than this short trade. However, about 3 weeks ago, on the weekly forecast, I was mentioning there were already signs of strong short strength forming in these areas right here. And moreover, there was confirmation of strong short strength in this area right here, which led me to take a short entry roughly at these levels right here. And then as price fell all the way down to these levels, there were never any signs of strong long strength, and so I was keeping that short position. However, this week on the 1 hour chart, there was a fake 1 hour double bottom that formed, which actually reached its target height level right here, which signals strong 1 hour long strength. And so as price slightly pulled back to these levels right here, I aborted that short entry at the 0.6677 levels around here. Now that said, like I mentioned earlier, if you go strictly from a daily bias, this long trade was stronger than this short trade. But since the ultimate say in terms of higher time frame biases are determined by the lower time frame confirmations, I did initially take that short entry. However, at this point right here, there was strong long strength confirmed on the 1 hour chart. And so I took a long entry roughly at the 68.04 levels with the stop loss at this pivot low right here and its main target being at this pivot high. Now at this point, the price action is rather complicated, so let me go ahead and show you how I entered this short trade and moreover what I'm looking at in terms of aborts. So let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 4 hour chart, that daily bias for the time being is stating that price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And so again, that 1 hour fake double bottom formed right here, which actually went as target height, signaling strong 1 hour long strength. However, as price pulled all the way back down to these levels, I did not initially take a long entry, for after strong long confirmation is confirmed, price typically does not fall down all the way back down to these levels past that 1 hour fake double bottoms pivot low right here. And so I only entered this long entry after price rose a little to close back above that 1 hour double bottoms pivot low, where I took a long entry roughly at the 68.04 levels around here, again with the stop loss at this pivot low right here and its main target being right here. Now again, as you can see, price pulled right back down after that long entry and actually made a new low right here, which is actually uncommon considering there was 1 hour strong long strength that confirmed. But for the time being, I am willing to still keep this long position. And now moreover, there was possible strong short confirmation that formed right at this point right here last night, which I'm up on the fence about because in my opinion, although very slight, was not legitimate trendline breakout confirmation of strong 4 hour short strength. Now let me just go ahead and show you this. Let's get rid of these. Okay, so again, on this 4 hour chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. There was a breakout, an immediate break back in, signaling normal long strength. However, price was able to pull right back down and last night stop out that pivot low where that normal long strength was created, which signals strong short strength. Now if this strong short strength was legitimate, I would abort this long entry immediately. However, I am maintaining that long position for the time being, for in my opinion, although extremely slight, I think this trend line used for this confirmation is not legitimate. And the reason is because the consolidation between each one of these pivots used for the trend line are ever so slightly not equal enough. So if price could have gotten a little bit higher, roughly around here, and made this second pivot, in that case I would abort that long trade immediately, for this trend line will be legitimate and thus a strong short strength was legitimate also. Okay, but for the time being, I am willing to stick with my initial analysis that ever so slightly there's not enough consolidation in this first pivot, so I will maintain this long position. Now moreover, what I want to see in terms of confirmation that in fact this trend line was not legitimate is for price to reach this 4 hour fake double bottoms target height level, roughly at these levels, before reaching his second bottom stop loss level right here. For that will signal 4 hour strong long strength. Okay, so for the time being, if price could get right back up to these levels before reaching this pivot low right here, I'll be much more comfortable with holding this long position. Okay, so I'll just watch what happens with this long trade in the coming weeks. Okay, so let's go on to the pound dollar. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this horizontal trend line just became legitimate with its 3 touches at 1, 2, and 3 right here, and since price has the tendency to want to test strong levels, in the long term I'm long biased right back up to this horizontal trend line. And moreover, since there was strong long strength on this monthly chart, with this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout, an immediate break back in, signaling normal short strength, our price coming right back up to that pivot high and creating strong long strength. And so as long as price does not break back into this trend line, in the medium term, I'm also long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So in October of 2021, there was a strong short trade that formed right here. Then a week-long trade formed right here. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And that main target was hit right here. And then 2 weeks later, there was actually a strong long trade that formed, which was stronger than this previous weekly short trade. And so the bias became long. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And so as price burst up close to that main target level, there was actually another weak short trade that formed right here. And so again, since this last long trade was stronger than this new weekly short trade, the bias remained long. However, the bias was now stating that price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. However, as price ranged for about a month in these areas right here, price hit a new monthly trend line that runs right through these levels, which became a target for this last weekly long bias. And so the bias became short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And that main target was hit right here. And moreover, this week, there was a new long trade that formed right here. And if the strength is measured strictly on this weekly chart of this long trade against this last weekly short trade, there is more short strength than long strength. So the bias would be short. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. So for the time being, if price could give a nice pullback to that main stop loss level at these levels right here, I will be willing to take a short entry. Now that said, there was actually a daily bias also that formed at these levels, which is actually showing a contradicting bias, which is stating that the daily bias is long. So let me go ahead and explain this setup to you. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, the last short trade that formed right here, and the most recent long trade that formed was 2 days ago right here. Now on this daily chart, there seems to be more long strength than short strength. And so the bias will be long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. So as you can see, although the weekly chart is short bias, the daily chart is long bias. So the price action is rather complicated because moreover, like I showed you on the overview, there is strong monthly long strength, while like I explained in last week's forecast, there is signs of weekly short strength. So it seems the biases on multiple levels from the daily chart to the monthly chart are showing mixed signals. So here's how I plan to trade this setup. So although I will be careful in terms of aborts and entries, if I could get lower confirmation of strong long strength, I will be willing to take this daily bias long with the stop loss at this pivot low and its main target right up here. So let me show you what's happening on the lower confirmations. Let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now, as you can see, there was a breakout, an immediate break back in, showing normal long strength. However, price came right back down yesterday to stop out that pivot low, thus showing 1 hour strong short strength. And so for the time being, the lower time frames is actually confirming a daily short bias. So the lower confirmation I'll be looking for to enter that daily bias, assuming that it's long, is to get 1 hour and above confirmation of long strength. So one trend line I'm looking at is from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now if price could come down and come right back up, break it out, and then immediately break back in, showing normal short strength. But if price could still reach this pivot high where that normal short strength was created, that will show strong long strength. And if this happens, I will be willing to take a long entry with the daily risk parameters I showed you earlier. Okay, and I'll keep you guys updated on the midweek analysis. Okay, and that's it for the weekly forecast. Now just a heads up, nearly every Forex pair is currently showing very tricky price action. Now by tricky, I mean every time frame strength is actually contradicting each other. Now in a market like this, I will only trade the pairs that have minimal contradiction, or trade pairs that would actually give me an opportunity to further evolve my strategy, like the NZD-USD trade I showed you. But that said, if you're a beginner trader, it may be wise to sit on the sidelines until the confusion clears. Now that's especially if you don't yet have a single strategy that you can evolve. Okay, so stay safe and have a great week, guys. And thanks for watching. Okay, bye.